Okay, well, welcome along. Just a very brief introduction because I know some of you have been with us before when we've been doing these. My name's Clive. I'm along with Caroline, one of the directors of Peak Accountancy Training, and we provide AAT courses in the classroom if you're in certain parts of the Northwest, but online all over the country towards the AAT qualification. Just a quick sort of plug. We do have, although not in management accounting yet, but we're doing our best to get these up and running as soon as we can. We've got question banks covering all of the financial accounting papers across all levels that are currently available. And we're currently running an offer of 50% off, which brings them down to a handsome price of a tenner, basically, for question banks, which we've got a good selection and volume of questions for each unit as well. So if you're interested, just check out our website. I think if I've got the date right as well, just to plug our next webinar that we're going to do, 5th of May, is that right, Caroline? It's disappeared.
Sorry, I muted myself, everybody. Yes, it is the 5th of May at 7 o'clock.
5th of May, we just organised a webinar at 7 o'clock. I'm gonna cover a bit of INAC stuff as well. So for you people studying for level 4, you might want to make a note of that one. Okay, as I say, if you've got any questions as we go through this evening, please do pop them into chat. Caroline's monitoring the chat box so I can concentrate on giving you my best as far as activity-based costing is concerned. I'm still letting people in as well. So let me just change my view. And if you were around about 5 minutes ago, I was considering playing Michael Jackson gently in the background as we go
I'll sing
through
for
this
you if you
evening.
want.
I lined it up as well as the title, but there you go. Just missed out that one. Activity-based costing is as easy as ABC, trust me. And I hope by the end of the next 45 minutes or so, you'll agree with me as well. It's quite heavily featured by AAT. It features in the level 3 qualification spec, so that's maths. It features in the level 4 qualification spec, so that's applied management accounting. For those of you that might be doing apprenticeship routes, it's also featured in the new version 1.2 of the role simulation that forms part of the endpoint assessment for level 4 as well. So it's quite popular, it seems, with AAT. So what is
Clive,
it?
just to interject, can you pop the file in chat for everybody in
Oh
case they
yeah,
want it?
sorry. Let me pop the file that I'm currently using into chat. Let me do that. That should be there now. If you wanna download it and follow through with me. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy. So what is it? It is a method of absorption costing, which was the subject of the last evening session that I did with you. Oh, excuse me, still letting people in. So it's a method of absorption costing, which is all about basically absorbing, charging, attributing a share of production overheads to cost units. However you want to think about it, basically, to absorb, to charge on, to allocate a share of. So why do we use it and when do we use it? Well, what AAT refer to sometimes as the traditional approach to absorption costing, or as I call it sometimes, the simple approach to absorption costing, is to calculate an overhead absorption rate, an OAR, that is based on what we call a cost driver. But with the traditional approach, that cost driver is related to volume. And what you've learnt about as you've gone through, well, level 2, if you did level 2, we touched on absorption costing as well. But in level 3 up to level 4, then that driver, that volume related activity is either the total number of units our business is budgeting to produce, or it's the total budgeted production labor hours that are needed, or it is the total budgeted number of production machine hours. The formula that we know and love to work out an overhead absorption rate is basically the total budgeted cost of the production overheads divided by the total budgeted activity. So total units, total labor hours, or total machine hours. So what we're basically saying is that we are happy that all of those production overhead costs can be fairly and reasonably charged to cost units based on simple volume related assumptions. Big question, is it really reasonable? What are all these production overheads being incurred for? And do they necessarily relate to volume of activity? Because after all, traditional method, that is basically what we're accepting. Now, for many businesses these days, a large part of their cost base is going to be overheads, particularly in service industries as well. And it's vital that as a business, as managers, we understand the cause of these overheads. Yeah? What is it we're doing that creates the costs and makes the costs go up? Then it's all about questioning, okay, well, as a business, then how are we using these resources that reside within this overhead cost base in the production of our products or the provision of our services? Now, if we only make one product or we only provide one service, it's quite obvious why we're incurring the overheads. But if we produce multiple products or provide multiple services, we need more management information to understand how those products and services could be using these overhead resources. So in other words, we want a more sophisticated absorption technique than just saying, let's bucket all of these overheads together and just simply divide them through by the number of units, the labor hours, or the machine hours. So into our toolbox comes activity-based costing, or ABC for short. So what we're going to do is work through a numerical example that basically compares the differences, shows the differences that the two approaches could have on our costings. So we're going to compare the traditional approach with an ABC approach to absorption. So I've excitingly, everybody, called our two products, product A and product B. And basically, my business currently absorbs my production overheads on the basis of machine hours. The reason I've selected machine hours is because my production process is highly automated. So there's a certain logical sense about using machine hours as my cost driver. In other words, I'm going to use machine hours to allocate, to absorb, to charge my production overheads to product A and product B. And by doing that, of course, I can complete my costing for product A and product B. The overhead charge will join my direct costs, my materials and my labor costs, to give me my full product cost, which I can then use as the basis of decisions. And one of those decisions, of course, is what price to charge. What price to charge to ensure that I cover my costs and contribute to an overall profit. Okay, so let's have a look at my info for product A and product B. I can see that I'm budgeting in this next period to produce 2,000 units of product A and only 500 units of product B. I've worked out that my standard time on the machines to make a unit of each product is 2 hours processing to make a unit of product A half an hour processing to make a unit of product B. So if I multiply that up, I can get my total budgeted machine time. I need 4,000 hours to knock out 2,000 units of A and 250 hours to knock out 500 units of product B. Now, I've got some other stats that I'm going to refer to when I do my ABC approach. For now, I'm going to go for my traditional, my simple machine hour approach. I've got the number of planned batch runs. Now, picture this. We've got a factory producing two products. Now, my production machinery is going to be set up to run a batch of product through. So I'm going to tool up all the equipment, as it were, yeah? I'm going to set up the equipment. That's going to cost money, isn't it? There's probably going to be a few people employed who are specialists at setting up the tools necessary, setting up the machines. Yeah, part of my overhead cost. So to produce my 2,000 units of product A, I'm going to do it in 4 batches. In other words, each batch run is going to produce 500 units of product A. Yeah, but to do product B, I'm going to need to set up 2 batch runs. Yeah, 2 batch runs to cover 500 units of product B. So far less units running through a batch for product B than product A. Now, every time I do a batch run, my equipment's got to be cleaned up. It's got to be tooled up again, as it were. Resources have got to be added to it. It's going to cost money. Each batch run is going to cost the business. Okay. Now, the other area of overhead I've highlighted is I've got some specialist testing department. Okay, so tucked away in a dark corner of my factory is a bunch of people who are doing some sort of quality control on the 2 different products. And as you can see, I've allocated a rough percentage time allocation to say, well, the bulk of these guys or ladies' work is going to be testing product B, which is, of course, the smaller volume product. The smaller proportion of the specialist testing department's work is going to be supporting product A. So there's my stats. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my traditional method. I'm going to say, don't split the overheads up. Let's look at all of them in one big go. And I'm happy to absorb my overheads simply based on the machine hours that are needed for production. So here's my overhead costs. The only figure I'm interested in here is the total at the bottom, £54,000. We'll ignore the split for now. Okay, so let's run through our overhead absorption rate calculation. Well, if I can get the right, there we go, text box in place. So my budgeted production overhead in total, £54,000, yeah? I've decided I'm happy to absorb my overheads by machine hours. My cost driver is machine hours. What are my total budgeted machine hours? Just going to flick back to double check. My total budgeted machine hours, 4,000 of them to produce 2,000 A's, 250 of them to produce 500 B's, 4,250 budgeted machine hours in total. So let's whack that in my table. My overhead absorption rate calculation, budgeted cost over budgeted activity, 54,000 divided by 4,250 gives me something like £12.71. I'm rounding this to 2 decimal places. For any AAT exam that involves calculations, always read the rounding instructions. They'll be generally given to you in the information at the beginning of the exam. If the examiner wants you to do anything different on a particular task, that information will be included with that particular task. Don't lose marks for incorrect rounding. So basically, I'm going to absorb, or I'm going to charge a share of my production overheads at the rate of £12.71 per machine hour. So let's have a look then at my costing for 1 unit of each product. So to do that, I need to know how long it's going to take me to make 1 unit of each product. That was in my stats at the beginning. I said it was going to need 2 hours to make 1 unit of product A, and it was going to take just half an hour to make 1 unit of product B. I've calculated my hourly overhead absorption rate is £12.71. So all I need to do is multiply the two together to work out how much overhead 1 unit of each product will be charged or will absorb. So for 1 unit of product A is 2 times £12.71, which basically is £25.42 of overhead. And for 1 unit of product B, it's 0.5 times £12.71, which gives me £6.36. Again, I'm rounding to 2 decimal places, £6.36 of overhead. So those overhead charges will add to my direct costs of production to give me my full product cost for a unit of product A and product B. From that, I can start to make decisions which include, vitally, what price should I charge my customers to make sure I cover my costs and I generate the profit that I'm looking for. So, question is, as a business owner, am I happy with that approach? Well, the problem is, you see, I'm producing as a business 2 products. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I've got complex processes, different processes that are producing those 2 products. So am I really happy in the way that I'm charging my overheads? Do they really reflect the effort that is going on down in the depths of that overhead cost base? So let's have a look at the same scenario, same figures, but let's cost it up using an ABC approach, using activity-based costing. These are my steps for an activity-based costing calculation. The first thing to do, identify what we call a cost pool. That's just an area of the business. It's just a department. Remember my specialist testing department? They would be a cost pool. Yeah, it's a particular area of the business that performs a service, an activity to help towards production. Yeah. So then for each of those cost pools, I'm going to identify an appropriate cost driver. Now, the way I look at this is that I'm going to basically think, okay, what is the prime activity of this cost pool that is causing the costs in the first place? Yeah. And the more of those activities that happen, surely the greater those costs are going to be. Yeah. So it's basically, I'm saying, what is the most appropriate way to charge a share of this area of the business costs to my production, my products? Yeah. So then I'm going to use my overhead absorption calculation for each cost pool. Budgeted cost divided by budgeted activity. I'm then going to use those absorption rates to work out an overall budgeted overhead for my total production, and that will enable me then to work out overall what's the average overhead absorption rate for 1 unit of the product. Okay, so my next table then is identifying my cost pools. Now, remember that £54,000 total? That was broken down by my question information into 4 cost pools. Facilities, a machine maintenance department, a production setup support department, and specialist testing. And I've got the budgeted costs for each of those areas of the overhead cost base. Now, what I need to do for each of those cost pools is to decide what is the driver of the cost, or put another way, how do I think I can reasonably charge a share of those costs to my individual products? Yeah. So what is my cost driver? Now, for facilities, no matter how you think about it, there really is no obvious way to do it, to share those costs across the different activities that are going on within the business, than to use the activity that you would choose for the traditional method. It makes no sense to do it any other way because of the relationship between facilities costs, the rents and the rates and the security of the building, all that sort of stuff, and the activities that are going on within. So I'm going to just use machine hours because that's how traditionally I would have done it. Let somebody in. The machine maintenance department, another cost pool of the business. Okay, well, how am I going to absorb their costs? What causes the costs in that department? You know, this is a bunch of people that are keeping the production machinery running at the end of the day. So surely there is a link between the number of hours that the machines are running and the amount of maintenance that is needed. There's a logical link there. So it would be perfectly reasonable to choose machine hours as my cost driver, the same as for facilities. What about my production setup support department? Remember, I was talking about the fact that I'm planning to have 4 batch runs for product A to make those 2,000 units. And I'm planning to have 2 batch runs to produce the 500 product Bs in this period. As I said, each of those batch runs will need to be set up. Machines will need to be retooled, cleaned up, maintained. And that is the cost of £8,000. So there's some labor costs in there, there's some consumables costs, whatever. That is the cost to set up the batch runs. Okay, so it makes sense to charge a share of that £8,000 based on the number of batch runs. Yeah, I can work out a cost per batch run and charge it to the different products. So my cost driver is going to be batch runs. Finally, for specialist testing, I'd assigned a percentage split, yeah, which is basically an estimate of the time they'd be spending supporting the 2 products that I'm making. And that percentage split was basically 25% in support of product A and 75% in support of product B. So I'm going to use my percentage split. So next step is to work out my overhead absorption rate. Budgeted cost over budgeted activity. Because I'm using machine hours to absorb both facilities and machine maintenance costs, I can just bolt them together. I don't have to. I can work out 2 separate rates, one for each, but at the end of the day, it will come to the same result. So to make it simple, I'm going to add the 2 together. I've got £40,000 worth of overhead that I'm absorbing on a machine hour basis. £40,000 of budgeted cost divided by the budgeted activity. What were those total machine hours? 4,250, weren't they? Divide through, again, 2 decimal place job because the number's running off the end of my calculator, £9.41. Quite often AAT work their questions so that it comes out with nice even numbers. Yeah, they'll come out to a magical whole number or they'll come out to a magical 2 decimal places. That's not real life. We have to round in real life, basically. So £9.41 per machine hour is my overhead absorption rate. What about my production setup then? £8,000 is the budgeted cost. What is the total budgeted activity? Well, it was 4 batch runs for A, 2 batch runs for B. That's 6 batch runs in total. £8,000 divided by 6 £1,333 and 33 pence, 2 decimal places, per batch run. So every time a batch run is set up, it's going to cost £1,333.33. Specialist testing, well, that's going to be done on my 25-75% split. So let's put that in, £6,000, 25% of it, £1,500, would be charged basically to product A, and then the rest of it, it's that 4,500, isn't it? Who needs a calculator at this time of night? 4,500 is going to be charged in support of product B. Okay, I've identified my cost pools. I've identified an appropriate driver. I've worked out an overhead absorption rate per unit of driver, yeah? So let's do my costings. So I've got a column for product A, column for product B, and I'm going to run through each of my cost pool areas, and I'm going to cost up my budgeted production overhead cost based on my drivers, yeah? So product A, facilities and machine maintenance. Remember, we're charging it at £9.41 per machine hour. There were 4,000 machine hours budgeted, weren't there, for product A? So 4,000 times £9.41 is £37,640. Yeah? What about product B? How much of the facilities and machine maintenance costs am I going to charge to support product B? Well, at £9.41 times 250 machine hours in total, that is going to give me 2,353. I'm rounding these to whole numbers. What's the decimal place when it comes to management accounting? It's really not going to make a slight bit of difference. But again, for your AAT exam, follow the examiner's instructions. Yeah, now those two together, for the astute of you, you think, okay, if I add those two together, I should come back with a £40,000 because that was the budgeted cost of the two activities together, wasn't it? It falls just a little bit short, but that is purely due to rounding. I've got 39,993, not 40,000. It's just because of the rounding that I've done to work out the overhead absorption rates and the final costings. Okay. Production setups then. Remember, £1,333.33 per batch run. 4 of them planned to produce my 2,000 units of A. So 4 lots of 1,333.33. That gives me, again, rounding to whole numbers, 5,333. And there were just 2 batch runs for the 500 units of B. So 1,333.33 times 2 is going to give me £2,667. Specialist testing, simple 25-75 split, wasn't it? Just let somebody else in. So product A is going to be charged with, we said £1,500, didn't we, of specialist testing costs, and product B is going to be charged with 4,500 of specialist testing costs. Okay, let's add it all up and see how much budgeted production overhead I am charging to the production of A and the production of B. So if I add it up, I get 44,373, or is it 473? Let me just add it up. 44,473. And for product B, my budgeted production overhead figure is going to be 9,520. Okay, now what I need to do is work out finally what the overhead absorption rate is, what the overhead charge is for one unit. Okay, I've got it for the total number of budgeted units. So all I need to do is divide each one through by the budgeted volume, I'm assuming. So for A, £44,473, divide that through by the 2,000 units I'm planning to make, which these costs relate to. And that basically gives me £22.24 of overhead a unit. Two decimal place roundings going on now. And for B, 9520, I'll divide that through by, what was it, 500 units, wasn't it, we're planning to make, and that gives me £19.04. Okay, let's do a comparison then. Let's pull together what calculations we have performed using my traditional method. Don't care about the overheads, chuck them in one big bucket, absorb the whole lot by machine hours only. What did I get as a result? I had £25.42 as the overhead cost of one unit of product A, and I had, was it £6.36, I think, which was the overhead charge for one unit of product B. Now, when I did it using activity-based costing, more detailed, more sophisticated, I had £22.24 as the overhead cost of one unit of product A, and I had £19.04 as the overhead cost for one unit of product B. The difference in the costings for the overheads then. For product A, I'm looking at a difference of £3.18. And for one unit of product B, absolute gulf between the two costings. Of course, the numbers are contrived to make the difference even greater, but in real life, the differences could be material. In this particular example, very material. The difference is a whopping £12.68. Okay, which one is better? Well, we've got to basically remember that the costings we are producing are being used as the basis for decisions. So we need to be pretty happy with the costing method, and that the costings we're producing are reflective of what is going on. Yeah, we get the costing wrong, we get the pricing decision wrong, and other decisions besides. Yeah, so for product A, using the traditional method, it's £3.18 more expensive than the costs we've allocated according to ABC. For product B, the traditional method has come up with a costing that is £12.68 lower than the costs we're saying should be attributed to a unit of product B using the ABC approach. Think about the difference that that could have had to the decision over the price to charge. Product B's price could have been set woefully short of recovering the actual costs that are being incurred. And for a business making decisions on controlling its costs, it could be doing completely the wrong thing. But as well as giving us a more reflective costing, ABC has all of a sudden unraveled, made visible a lot more information about our overhead cost base. Yeah? So let's have a look at the rationale. You know, the when ABC, the why ABC. Yeah? When do we use ABC? When we have a material amount of overhead. We want to be sure that how we're absorbing it, how we're charging it, makes sense. Yeah? Where we have multiple products being produced, or we are providing multiple services. If we're only producing one product or one service, why on earth would we go for a complicated method of absorption? Yeah? You know why the overheads are being incurred. Yeah? Complexity of process. We need to realize that the processes behind the production of our different products, the processes behind the provision of our different services could basically be very different. And they could be using parts of our overhead cost base in very different ways. So, why ABC? Well, greater visibility of overheads. The traditional method had all those overheads in one massive bucket. We don't know what's going on. Yeah, we don't know what's causing them. So with ABC, we split that massive bucket into loads of smaller buckets, didn't we? Loads of cost pools. We've started to understand what is going on in our offices and our factory in the overhead areas. We start to understand what people are doing and why they're doing it. Yeah. So we have more management information to question overheads. More reliable costings. Our example demonstrated the inadequacy of the traditional, the simple method in coming up with a decent costing for product B. Better decisions. We got a more accurate costing. We can make better decisions on what to do. We can also make better decisions on how to try and control our overhead costs in the first place. You know, we're starting to ask questions about, hang on a minute, why on earth should a unit of product B be so much more expensive than a unit of product A? Can we learn something from product A? Can we simplify the processes for product B? Or are we sure that we need that complexity of process? Yeah. You know, the differences that we've seen in the costings, what are they due to? They're not due to facility costs and machine maintenance. How do I know that for certain? Because basically we've ended up using the same cost driver to absorb the overhead. The difference has been thrown up because of how product B is using the production setup area and the specialist testing area. Product B, though relatively small in volume, is demanding more of the resource setting up batch runs. It is demanding more of the resource of specialist testing than product A. Is that right? Can we simplify it? Or are we happy that that's true? Therefore, we must change the price of B. Yeah, lots of information all of a sudden for management to think about what to do. So, why ABC? Greater visibility of overhead, more information which to question overhead and try and control it, more reliable costings, better decisions, impacts on pricing and profitability. A final section that says, okay, well, still maybe why not ABC, even if we think it's looking like a good idea. There's some other things to consider. The process costs money. Activity-based costing as an exercise is expensive. Yeah? Somebody has to go round and analyze the business. Management accountants, very expensive people. Trained to be a management accountant, specialize in it. It's great. You can command huge amounts of money, trust me, he says, working in an evening. Anyway, they cost a lot of money. You can imagine loads of management accountants with clipboards walking around an office or a factory, working out what people are doing, questioning them, you know, why they're doing it. How does your work relate to this product, to this service? Yeah, because they're working out what the appropriate cost driver is and how to absorb the overheads. Yeah, very expensive. But also, activity-based costing tends to use specialized software. That costs money as well. So we need to justify the cost benefit. Yeah, cost benefit analysis, big thing in level 4 when you come to sort of endpoints if you're an apprentice or elsewhere in level 4, you know, you need to justify recommendations using a cost benefit analysis. You're not going to shed loads of money if the benefit is outweighed by the cost. Not mad. Yeah, why would you do that? Anyway, you need time to investigate and analyze the overhead cost base. You can just think, oh, pound signs mounting up here. The cost drivers may still be contentious. Why have I put that? You might go to a cost pool. You might interrogate. You're not going to interrogate the manager. Well, you might. You're going to question the manager and say, okay, what are you doing? Yeah. What activity are you performing? And there might be more than one. Yeah, key thing that they do, and you've still got to make a decision. Okay, well, which one am I going to absorb the cost under? Okay, that's why I've put that one in there. Talked about buying software. Once you've done the analysis, once you've bought the software, once you've plugged your information in, it's going to spew out loads of reports, and somebody's got to interpret this for the rest of the business. That's the job of a management accountant as well. Can't do without them, basically. So all of that costs money. Yeah. The other thing at the end, even if you have multiple products and multiple services, if the vast majority of your costs still relate to facilities, you're not going to get a material difference in the costings. Yeah. Why? Because remember, and we demonstrated at the end of the day, facility costs, you're going to fall back on the traditional method of absorption using a volume related driver. So if the bulk of your costs sit in facilities, it really isn't going to make that much difference. Yeah. So you're looking for complexity of process. You're looking for material amounts of overhead in total. You're looking for multiple product or multiple service environments. This is where ABC can start to reveal information. And that, everybody, is why ABC is so simple. That is all there is to it. The only thing as a student I would hate is, God, the calculations take a long time. But stick with it. The actual theory behind it and the rationale behind it is quite straightforward, guys, at the end of the day. That's it. Anybody got any questions? I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat box. I'm sure Caroline has. Um, there
We've
you
not
go.
had any questions just yet.
No questions just yet. Well, as I say, this has been recorded. We'll pop it on our YouTube channel. Probably be first thing tomorrow morning, something like that, because I need my tea. And the rest of you, need a night off. So thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget, diarise the 5th of May. I'll run you through some internal control systems. There's something to look forward to. Thank you very much
Thanks
and
very
good
much,
night.
Clive. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.